Hello, hello. Um, hi everyone. It looks like Roxy's backstage, just waiting for her. Perfect. We're
She
all
got
here. Great. We're all
To find the
here.
button. I got it.
Hello, DBT community. So we're coming at you live today. I'm Amada. I'm on the community development team at community team at DBT Labs, and I'm joined by Alex Welch, the head of data at DBT Labs, and Roxi Dahlke, one of our great product managers. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We are all here today for our new monthly live Ask Me Anything event series. So it's a chance for folks to connect and learn together and for you to get your questions answered. So we've taken some questions in advance in Slido, and we'll be taking a few live from Slack as well. And if we don't get to your question today, don't worry, we'll definitely respond in Slack right after the event. So today's topic is BI and the semantic layer, and we'll be having a casual discussion on trends in the analytics space. We'll be sharing key takeaways from recent events, and we'll be hearing your thoughts and questions as well. So please chat away in Slack. And so for conversation with your fellow community members, to ask additional questions, all of that good stuff, please use the Slack channel called DBT Community Merge. It's on the landing page as well. That's where we are today. And just to keep the conversation in scope, we'll be talking about and taking questions on, like I said, BI, the semantic layer. So think BI tools, analytics trends, all these things. We will not be answering questions about, which BI tools are the best or anything like that. We also won't really have time for troubleshooting DBT instances or talking about feature roadmaps, nothing like that. So if you keep your questions on topic, we're so happy to answer them. And if you do need help troubleshooting and you're watching, please post in DBT Cloud semantic layer with your questions or reach out to DBT Cloud support if you're a customer. So like I said, I'm Amada community team, and I'm joined by Alex Welch and Roxi Dahlke. So excited to be with you today. And yeah, so we can maybe get started with our first question. So we can go with Roxi. What are you most excited about at the moment?
Yeah, I think I'm really excited about the paradigm shift of really bringing non-technical users into the fold with semantics. I think there's the word self-serve had been taboo for a little while because it's a very hard thing to do, to actually bring less technical users and allow them to ask their own questions and be self-sufficient. But I think the rise of the semantic layer is really can propel that. And it's an awesome start to bringing those users into analytical workflows. But then, of course, with AI, this is even more prudent. So I'm really excited about what that leads to in the coming months and years.
Yeah, I think there's something more to that too. If anyone was watching the webinar yesterday, I think you'll hear me say it again, though, is everyone, when they think about semantics, they think about BI, they think about like the deliverables, but like what I'm particularly excited about are the other aspects that you can use a semantic layer for, especially when it's removed from a BI layer. Roxi mentioned AI, there's operationals, there's embedding, there's all sorts of these really fun use cases. So I'm really excited to see where that paradigm goes and how it shifts.
Great. Thank you. So what are any unexpected or interesting insights regarding business intelligence and analytics that you might have? Alex, we can start with you.
Honestly, I think it's the biggest surprise is that it took so long to get here. And, when you take a step back, it feels really, intuitive to a certain degree, right? Like you're always complaining and hearing complaints about metrics not aligning, not having a single source of truth. And then you go back, you try and design that out in your models. And then the BI kind of surge came, and they started kind of like Look ML and even Tableau to a certain degree. You model that out in those layers, but then to actually see like a extrapolated layer emerge, I think that's what surprises me the most, is that we're here now as opposed to a little bit earlier, but it's an exciting spot to be in.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And what about you, Roxi?
Yeah, I agree with Alex. It's the concept of semantic layers has kind of been around for a while, but not in the form that we're seeing it today in the modern data stack. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And additionally, I think the last few weeks have been pretty exciting with the buzz around Iceberg. I
Yeah.
think this is really interesting. We're heading towards a world where it's looking like bring your own compute is going to become more commonplace. I think among other things, this makes the semantic layer even more important. But yeah, that's pretty exciting to me. I don't exactly know what all the implications are yet. We're hoping to explore that more, but it is very interesting and exciting.
I completely agree with that too. The other side of the warehouse becoming much more important and interesting as well.
Okay, thank you. So, want to hear from both of you. What is the difference between a metrics layer and a semantic layer? Roxi, you first.
Yeah, this is a funny question because it's sort of, in some ways, it depends on who you ask. I think I came from the Transform team before DBT Labs, and we kind of talked about a metrics layer and metric store, but really we were building a full-on semantic layer. But I will say, traditionally, I think a metric store is kind of more referred to as a repository that just provides context on metrics and how they should be defined wherever users are. And the semantic layer is kind of a broader abstraction of all objects that includes dimensions and different relationships with context. You could interpret it as a metric store as kind of a subset of a semantic layer. And we've also seen certain tools build in kind of metric stores within their tools by themselves, which help get people aligned in that tool, but aren't really universal. I think overall, my take is that metric store should be part of a semantic layer, but is not the full picture of really bringing that context to the users that are consuming it from it.
I think that's the first time I've really thought about it in that way, and I really love that kind of like subset of the semantic layer. And I think another, like when I think of metrics versus semantics, metrics I kind of envision sitting really close up to like features when you think of like machine learning operations and things like that, where you have the numbers, you have the kind of logic defined, but semantics brings a whole another level of context that is really relevant to the business. And so I think both of those are, I think they are subsets of semantics in themselves.
Yeah, great, thank you. So we're waiting for some more questions to come in. Want to give folks some time. Please don't be shy. You can really go for it. So until we get a few more, well, I can leave it up to you. You can open it up to you too. So we get some more questions. So do you want to expand on anything we've just covered, or do you have a question for one another?
Roxi, I'll ask you this. When you guys were first kind of like looking at semantic layer at Transform, and then, well, let's start there at Transform. Like, how were you approaching the problem differently, and like from what angle? What did that look like?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question because we were just building the semantics on top of whatever you'd already defined, and it was isolated. I think with building it with DBT, I think is a lot different because we have so much more context. So I think when we were building it, we were thinking about how are we going to get all this context. Like, it was a really hard problem to figure out how to get from the source all the way to your metrics, whereas DBT actually has all that already. So I think that was one big shift when we started kind of thinking about how we were going to integrate the two products last year. And I think it just makes a lot of sense, and it really kind of fulfills that semantics promise, if you will.
Yeah.
Alex, I'm curious, in your experience, how have you seen people handle the kind of inconsistencies that you get without a semantic layer? I'm sure you've seen it all, like up and down the map.
You mean besides running to an analyst and being, why are these numbers wrong?
Yeah. Besides that, that's also a good one.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen it done so many different ways. Like there's a Excel way where people just start like listing out, okay, here is the metric, here's the logic, here's the definition, so and so. There's like Confluence or Notion. We were trying to document that stuff, but all those run the risk of immediately going stale. And especially if you don't have everyone pointing to that, right? I've seen ways where people have used the dim fact tables and dimensional modeling to try and get to that and say like, okay, this is my single source of truth. But for all those, right, as soon as you start scaling beyond your kind of initial team and where you're at, and you involve teams that aren't directly working in that code base or the documentation every day, it's incredibly easy for it to fracture. And all of a sudden you get a million different things. And then additionally on top of that, when you have, I come from like a B2C background for a while. And so the concept of an account, what is an account? Could mean one thing to finance. It could mean another thing to revenue, to marketing. And so like, it's just a really fast and slippery slope down there without having that governed layer.
I love the last piece you noted. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, just same thing.
I think one thing we talk to a lot of folks considering the semantic layer about is that it really forces the business teams and data teams to have those difficult conversations of what is an account for us. And maybe this is a different metric or a different entity that we need to consider, that if you say it's A and I say it's B. So I love that it sort of forces, the semantic layer really forces the conversation of what the meaning of particular objects are in the scope of your data.
It actually even goes deeper than the definition, and it gets to more like, I don't know, I don't want to become a philosopher here or anything, but like when we were trying to implement this at DBT, it actually brought up a lot of questions, even in like down to where do we put this in our code base, right? Like how do we structure things? Where does it belong in the most natural way? And in doing so, we started thinking about like, okay, like what does this metric truly represent and how is it tied and interconnected with all the different areas that it touches? And it turned into this really interesting exercise for us to really, and I think it really broadened our understanding of like deeper than just like surface of how these things actually interoperate with each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Roxi, just want to follow up on something you said. I know you noticed you were talking about the semantic layer prompts. How do you go about defining those definitions you mentioned once the semantic layer prompts those discussions?
Oh, like in the product. Yeah. Yes. So it's very similar to how you define your DBT models. We have YAML configurations, which allow you to define your metrics with, what expression is used to calculate them, what underlying aggregation is used, as well as other contexts like a description, so that anybody who's looking at the number is more than just the number, but also the context behind it.
Okay, got it. Thank you. So, question for both of you: what do you wish you knew about BI tools when first getting into your careers? Alex.
What do I wish I knew about BI tools?
Yeah,
I think I wish I was more. I wish I was more skeptical of the promise that was being made. Right, like coming in my first interaction with BI tool was, oh god, a long time ago, and it was like, oh, we can do anything with this. We can build these great dashboards. We can get everyone aligned. We can, it's going to be awesome. And then, it turns into this massive sprawl. It turns into a lot of contradictory numbers and tech debt. And if you're not very thoughtful about how you deploy and you build and where you put the responsibilities, and so, that was something I wish I would have been seasoned enough to think through earlier in my career.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I have a similar answer, more so around like a personal anecdote where I delivered an incorrect metric from a BI tool to the CEO of a previous company. So kind of along the same lines, like kind of never trust what's there unless you have to verify it with someone. Obviously the semantic layer changes that, but the trust the trust component is has been pretty tough. And I think, that is the promise of defining things in code and having a single source of truth, but definitely ran into some friction in the past by being too trusting, if you will.
This sounds a little daunting to someone who's perhaps starting their journey in data and product. So what gets you through those sticky situations like the one you just mentioned, Roxi?
Yeah, I think just kind of over communicating on the what happened, what it was, and like how it could be rectified, and like really chatting with folks on the data side on what the right way is to make sure that doesn't happen to somebody else. I think obviously the long-term answer for anyone in that situation is to use a semantic layer, but maybe there's some short-term things that can happen to make, reduce those situations ahead of, going full in on the semantic layer.
Yeah. And for both of you, just what's been the most exciting part of your journey at DBT thus far? Maybe Alex first.
Most exciting part. So I've been here for about 7 months. I'm pretty new here. My most exciting part. I mean, I think this is going to sound so cliche, but it really is the people in the org. I've never really worked in an organization where everyone was so data literate. And as I've been building data organizations throughout my career, one of the biggest challenges has been like, how do I get people to really engage with the data? How do I get people to really use data to make the decisions, the strategic decisions? And here we have people in the data all the time, as you can imagine, right? Being DBT. And I think it's really unique here as well is we have people outside the data org actually building and committing code to our internal repository that will then go into production. And so I think that's so cool to like have a culture like that and have people that are engaged and believe in data at that level. It's awesome.
Absolutely agree. We got great folks. So what about for you, Roxi?
Yeah, I think definitely the people, and then also the community, because when we were building Transform, we obviously had people testing it, but not quite the distribution that DBT has. So having such a great community of folks that are excited about these products and like ready to test and use them has just been so much fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we got in a question on Slack. So from Jenna. Thank you, Jenna. So what do you think the differences are or should be between a semantic layer and a metrics layer? We kind of touched on that, but to what extent? This is our question from Slido, right? Yeah, it's asking about our plans and things like that. So Jenna, we kind of went over this a little bit, but if you have anything to say about that, we can add to it. Sorry about that. As I was reading it, I was like, wait, this just came in, but it's the one we touched on.
All good. Like expanding on the metric store question potentially would be.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Yeah, I think that'd be helpful for Jen's question.
Yeah, I think I would probably say that using like a metric store could be a start on getting people aligned, but I think ultimately for the full scope of your data, including dimensions and how relationships on how different parts of your data sets are related, I think for that level of consistency and to truly enable self-serve, I think you need the full semantic layer.
Yeah, I think the other component of that is if you are using DBT Cloud, it is, it ties everything together for you. So you have that lineage, you have all down to the column through the semantic layer. You can see what is impacting your critical metrics. You can see what those are actually tied into. And, as you're organization continues to mature, and if you are using the dbt cloud product, like it almost becomes a necessity to really, maintain your sanity at a certain level, because the more you mature, the more you add to your project, the more complexity you add to it. You need to find mechanisms that are going to help you like rein those in. And without the semantic layer, you're kind of left to your own devices to like figure out how to do that in a way. But when you start combining this with all the other benefits that dbt cloud gives, it becomes more than the sum of its parts, I think.
Yeah. So we have another question that just came in from Willa. So is the data modeling layer dim fact tables interchangeable with the semantic layer? Did we touch on this?
I think we have.
Yeah.
We have not touched on it, but we can. So I can give my opinion, and then Roxi, I think it'd be really interesting to hear yours as well. So, because I think what's interesting about this is Roxi has a very product viewpoint about like how that is, and then I have the practitioner side. So for me, I think that what the semantic layer can do is it can reduce the complexity of your marts layer to a very high level, right? So one of the questions we got yesterday during the webinar was, hey, I have these fact tables that are all these different granularities, daily, monthly. What do I do with these? How do I make this work? And even looking at our marts repository, right? Like all this stuff, but when you have the semantics on top of it, it's like, why are you truly doing dim fact modeling at a certain level? And that's to create really valuable constructs to give to downstream applications that are going to actually consume those and help you drive those actionable insights. And so when you put semantics on top of that, you can start kind of stripping away things. You're always going to need something there to represent the most granular and more atomic elements of whatever your data it represents. But you won't need as much because you're going to take all the kind of elements, the dimensions and things like that, and timeframes and windows, and put those in the semantic layer. And then you'll be able to do your aggregations on top of it. And before I pass over to Roxi, I'll say at my previous employer, what we did to try and solve for that is we actually created a schema for aggregations. So we had our dim facts, and then we created a whole nother schema that said, okay, here's all the different aggregations we needed. And that could be completely wiped out now with the semantic layer. And that's all that tech debt, all that code that we don't have to maintain anymore. The compute power is gone that we don't need to maintain. All the complexity in CI is gone. All that stuff is taken care of, right? And so that's how I think about how those work together. But I'm curious about your opinion, Roxi.
Yeah, that was a great answer. I think the one-liner I sometimes use when talking about kind of how the paradigm changes the semantic layer is that you should use the transformations in dbt to normalize your data that's coming in from your sources, and then you should let the semantic layer denormalize that for you on the fly, as opposed to having tables that you maintain at different grains ready to be consumed. Like instead, relying on the semantic layer to do that heavy lifting for you and your data team, I think is it's just going to make it so much easier and kind of extend the discoverability of assets across for your end consumers. So it's not, you don't have to continuously create static data sets for your consumers.
Yeah, great, thank you. That was a good question. So we have another one. So I like this question. As a data practitioner who's trying to convince their team leader about the need for the semantic layer, do you have any good examples that you can showcase, that you can use to showcase this? They can be anecdotal, but like, how would you convince the team lead to that you need the semantic layer?
So I think it kind of goes back to the answer that I just gave a little bit before, right? So if I were to try and convince, if I were earlier in my career and I was trying to convince somebody to implement a semantic layer, right? Things I'd be looking at is, okay, like what can I replace with it? So there's two problems, right? Like there's the problem with just like the business. So like, can you standardize your metrics? Then there's the technical problem. Okay, so like how much tech debt, how much compute, what are the cost allocations of that? And so trying to find a proposition where you're identifying those and you're saying, hey, this is how we're solving that. We are reducing cost by X. Like, say you're using Snowflake, it should be pretty easy to find the compute that you might be saving on that. You can actually put a $sign on that, right? And then layer on the kind of like abstraction of what the tech debt, the time we spend maintaining all these dim fact tables. If you're running intraday jobs, how much you can reduce those job times. Just from a technical aspect, there's that benefit. And then on the other side, like, it should be pretty easy at a certain point to be like, hey, how many times have we heard these numbers don't match, right? And just kind of pulling those out, even if it has to be at an anecdotal level, like, will really help build that case around the semantic layer.
Gotcha. Thank you. And what about you, Roxy?
Yeah, well, that's great. I think the compute is really interesting because you are going to be in kind of like the traditional build a wide table or one big table model. You're going to be building these large data sets where maybe like 1% of the dimensions in that data set is used, versus with the semantic layer, it's more dynamic. So there's more flexibility around what you actually have to store. So that's a big part of it, like Alex said. Also, this is like hard to measure, but we've talked about like, some maybe it's like a data NPS score or something for your data consumers, but distrust in data sounds very ominous and vague, but I think it really does loom over organizations, because if you constantly feel like you have to go ask somebody to get a question answered, you're never going to feel empowered to do it on your own. So I think maybe there's something there that can be measurable on how people feel about the data that they're being presented with.
That's great. And if I could expand on that just a little bit.
Yeah.
The way I look at it is, if somebody's coming to you with a question because they don't believe what's in the dashboard, right? That's inherently creating a negative interaction with your data team, whether or not you get to the right answer or not, right? It's underneath it all. It's like, why wasn't it right in the first place? You guys built it, you maintained it, right? And so it's this grit that is being kind of like right in between it, even though you guys may come out all happy you got the right answers, but it's like, why couldn't we get there in the first place? Why did I have to slow down to do this? So that was another good use case to say, hey, like, we need a layer to help prevent that, an abstraction to help prevent that. Because it can whittle down your relationship, right? Like, little by little by little, if that continues to happen, your relationship with the business can really take a hit.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So really, this is allowing people to have autonomy and agency over their data, and the distrust in the data leads to distrust in the teams, it sounds like.
Yeah, without a doubt. And data teams are always fighting for their place and their, like, where they're at. And you have to treat it like a currency almost. You have to, like, the trust that you get with the business, it really is. And it goes quicker than it's earned. So you have to protect, you have to fight for it.
Yeah. Quite the challenge.
Yeah.
Looking for no questions right now, so we could go back to something that one of you touched on. So Roxy, you'd mentioned when we were talking about the most exciting part of your journey at DBT, that looks like some organizations might struggle with using data. So how do you promote that? Like, how do you promote folks using it?
Oh, just like based on the struggles I've had in the past on.
Very personal to you.
Yeah. I think like building confidence in the assets that you're creating, I think is a big part of it. But that without something that's truly governing you, I think it's easy to get to a place where you're not sure if this is the right column, or you're not sure if this is the right table that you should be using. But like, ultimately, I think it's like going to be better than not for users to for end consumers to try and get their hands dirty and answer their own questions. But it's going to be hard without some additional support from the data side and being, thinking about alignment on, the number you're looking at is the same as the number that someone else is looking at. So I think it really just comes down to communication for the most part, and that's how you build confidence. But there also has to be a product side of it as well. Obviously, I'm biased because I'm the product manager for a semantic layer, but shameless plug. I don't know if that helps answer the question, but that's been my journey.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So how do you both stay updated with the latest developments and best practices?
We talked about this. We had very different approaches to this, I think, when we were having a discussion earlier. My approach is I consume a lot of media. So I go through, I watch the blogs and like all this stuff, and I do it with the intent of not necessarily like reading every word, but I'm like trying to identify phrases and terms and things that are new to me. And I basically kind of like log that away. I'm like, okay, that was interesting. And then all of a sudden, if I see that term again in like 2 weeks in another blog, in like another 2 blog posts, I'm like, okay, now I'm going to start taking note of that. And then if another 2 weeks from now, it's in like 10, I'm like, okay, this might be a trend that like is starting to come up. It's starting to coalesce around some sort of idea. And then I start kind of really diving into things and trying to like understand, what is its purpose? How does it play into, how could it play into what we're doing? Because everything's moving so fast, and there's so many people out there, especially if you consider the AI world. Everyone's trying to find their niche and trying to find, like, how do you optimize what we have, this technology we have, because we don't quite understand it all yet. And so instead of trying to dive down every single thread that I find, I try and wait for it to just coalesce just enough so that you're still on the bleeding edge and cutting edge of like, that's a really cool idea, but you haven't wasted a ton of time just chasing every single thread that branches off. So that's how I like to kind of feel my way through the kind of like chaos that is.
Yes, great. Thank you. What about you, Roxy?
I really need to take some notes from you on your methodology, because I tend to do the opposite, and then I end up like I'm obviously on LinkedIn a lot, looking at data thought leaders, seeing what they're posting about. But I think I tend to go really deep, and then I'm not exactly sure, which components to pull out. So I definitely struggle with this, but yeah, LinkedIn quite a bit. And sometimes I've followed sort of various tech, subscribe to various tech emails where you get information about things in the data space or things in the AI space. But it is sometimes hard to keep track of the fast moving pace of this industry.
Yeah, definitely. Got it. And, of course, a suggestion to everyone on how to stay up to date is, attend Coalesce, but, I'm unbiased. So we can get into technologies and methodologies. So how do you, if we feel like we've touched on this a bit much, let me know, but how do you ensure the accuracy and reliability of your data models?
I think it is treating it as if it is more than just data, right? Like, so like, what does it mean? And then having a really pushing to get an understanding of what it means, right? So if you're just saying, okay, this is a table and it goes to this table, it goes to that table, like, I don't think you're going to set yourself up for success, right? If you say, like, okay, this represents what this customer's journey is, right? And you really start diving into it and saying, okay, like, what are the components of the journey? And is that appropriately represented in this pipeline that I've built or this table that I've built or whatever it is? I think that's how you build very sustainable models. And if you go back and you read a lot of like the analytics roundup and analytics engineering roundup and a lot of stuff from early DBT, you will find a lot of themes around, hey, like, it is super important to take the time to understand the business need and what they're asking, and then translate that into the model. And that's really where the idea of the analytics engineer kind of coalesced around, right? And so, I believe that wholeheartedly. You have to find a way to take those needs of the business and what the customer is saying through the data and represent that in a structure that you can leverage and tease out.
Perfect. Thank you. What about you, Roxy?
Yeah, that's just expanding on Alex's point. I think this goes back to the forcing function of semantics and how it forces those conversations between the data consumers and the data producers. I think also, from a more tactical side, I think all the tests and quality that you can benefit from in the DBT ecosystem to make sure that things are performing as you'd expect. The data is what you expect it to be. I think that's also a big part of ensuring that confidence before you go to production with something. But most importantly, it's what Alex noted, which is what are the key things that we want to look at? What do they mean, and how do we define them in code? And also being open to those things evolving. And I think with the semantic layer approach, you get just a lot more agile in that regard, because you're not having to build and rebuild tables consistently.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So getting into more of each of your backgrounds, what industries have you worked in, and what changes in each industry? I think we touched on this before in previous conversations.
Yeah, I can start. My first job out of college was working as an analyst for a company that did utility data analytics. So much data, from hourly level data from metering devices, everything up to the transformer that the meter was hooked into. Super interesting data set, so much data. And also the utility space is one that's not, given it's been around for a while, so you wouldn't necessarily call them modern. So a lot of really fun experiences there, and learning about these sort of legacy deployments of, a lot of on-premise, a lot of old technologies used. So that was, I think, a really interesting starting point for my data career, to kind of see what's already been there and the foundations that have been set. And then, all the way up to DBT now, which is very much so on the more modern side. And I think it's also important to remember how many organizations are probably still on those legacy foundations. There's a lot of opportunity. I think that's kind of interesting as well.
Yeah, I was in very much the same boat. I started in logistics, moved to finance, and I think it takes a while to realize when you're young and you're coming out and you're like, okay, all these new technologies, let's just run at it. Let's build something really, really cool and kill it and crush it. And then you realize that is really hard once things are built on a platform, right? And so when you have these industries and these companies that have been around for a long time, you have to realize that at one point they were groundbreaking. They were the leaders. They were using the most up-to-date technology, and they committed to that. And it's just kind of says to the industry itself, how fast data moves. And so, coming from larger industries and older industries like that, you're going to see that a lot. And I've worked on DB2, and I had to write Pascal at one point in my career, and I don't know anybody who does that anymore. I don't even know if most people know what that is anymore. But that was because the cost of switching off of those legacy systems was so monumental that it was cheaper and more efficient to just maintain them than it was to switch over to Snowflake or something like that, right? And then in the eyes of those industries and those companies, going to a new technology is scary, because what if it's not around in 5 years, in 10 years, right? You've invested so much, which is why you see a lot of companies too. It took a long time to get to the cloud, right? Because what was it? What did it represent? Is it secure? A lot of people didn't really understand what it was. And then once it got established, you saw more and more adoption. But it was it takes a long time. The bigger the company, the older the industry, the longer it's going to take to get stuff over on scale. You might see like little teams pop up where they're like using DBT and Snowflake and they're doing all sorts of cool stuff. But on a broader scale, it's going to take the organization a longer time to like ramp into that.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you. So how do I get started using the DBT semantic layer?
I'll let you,
Yeah.
you can take it from your angle, Roxy.
Yeah. Okay. I think there's like a tactical question as well as like a greater organizational question maybe, but tactically I think if you're using DBT Cloud on Teams or Enterprise, you can actually get started right away by configuring the semantic layer in your project settings and then defining your configurations in the same place that you define the rest of the objects in your DBT projects. You can hook into any one of our existing integrations, and all that kind of connection info is provided to you once you configure it. Then I think, ahead of that, we typically recommend when organizations are getting started to think about kind of even just like 3 to 5 really important metrics that need to be accurate. Maybe you're powering an executive dashboard, let's say, and start with those and build it out to get a feel for what it's like to use a semantic layer and kind of in a way, like if you've already been using DBT, you're sort of maybe you're doing some denormalization in DBT. Well, you can kind of shift some of that over to actually doing that in the semantic layer instead. And that's a really good starting point for folks to get in the door. And we also have what's called exports, which you can actually export data back to your data platform too, if you just want to see what it's like to define metrics and have them written back to your platform. Yeah, we'd be happy to share getting started guides as well in the channel if it would be helpful.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think Roxy is right on point with that. Like, and the way that we had adopted it when we were really testing out and playing with the semantic layer is we started with a very small subset of metrics, right? We started with our OKRs, our company high-level critical metrics. We didn't try and boil the ocean, go through everything, and we took our time really going through that, choosing which ones we wanted to implement, which ones we could successfully, and we took a lot of time to think about, how does it sit in our DBT project? Where do the files sit? What should the naming conventions be? What should we even name the metrics, right? And we went through a couple iterations of this before we pushed to prod, because we learned as we went, right? Like what did the metric actually correlate to? What impacted what? And you're going to find that you're going to uncover a lot as you go through that exercise. So on top of what Roxy said of choosing a critical set of metrics, I would say just plan to take your time on the first couple iterations of it, because you will learn a lot about your data and how you think about it and how you think about your code as you go through it.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you. So we just got this interesting question in. How do we expect BI to change from the rise of Gen AI?
Dramatically. Dramatically. BI platforms will become really interesting, and I think it'll become more of a interface where, especially with LLMs, and I think this is where semantic layer becomes really interesting. And what I kind of hearkened to at the very beginning, right, is if you could ask your BI tool or system or whatever, or app or whatever it is, what is revenue over the last 6 months? Show me year over year broken down by like week, right? And the AI can go do that for you. That does a lot for the platforms and what they have to do and what they're responsible for. But having said that, that's where I think I'm excited about the semantic layer, because in order to provide the context to do that, right, it's not as simple as just pointing AI to tables and your data warehouse and saying, go forth and figure this out, because you'll get a lot of hallucinations, you'll get a lot of incorrect answers. And what you need to do is kind of almost take like the the small language model approach to a certain extent, and provide it the context that you expect it to have to be able to do that. So I think there's like this, it's going to be more personal. I think if I had to really dial things back and like think a little bit differently, I think BI will become more personal to the user than just like a general cockpit or broad dashboard. It'll be like, okay, what do I need to solve my business problem to then move forward?
Yeah, totally agree on that. I think I almost can't even imagine, like, it's almost so, I can't even imagine the possibilities. But I do think that the personalization is a big part, as well as it becoming more of an interface, not just to get a number, but also to discover. With like right now, when you're in Tableau, you have a set of, let's say as an example, or any BI tool really, you have a kind of a set of things that you can interact with. But maybe there's something else. How do you find that something else? Typically you have to go ask somebody, hey, where do I get this thing, this column or this attribute? But with kind of large language models, you can actually maybe ask that question and have help for that to be discovered and found. So that's also really very cool.
I think it also brings more advanced capabilities forward, right? So if you are in a BI tool, it's really hard to get like predicted numbers that could be out in front. Whereas you could ask the LM to say like, okay, run a regression and give me like these things, or run a confusion matrix, or whatever you want to do. It can really help you to, like, even if you don't know the underlying math or methodologies, you can delegate that to the LM and let that, push out a very meaningful output to you and to your stakeholders. So I think that's a really interesting, to Roxy's point, the potential capabilities are wild here.
Yes, absolutely. So we don't have a ton of time. Looks like 2.5 minutes, but I think we can squeeze a quick one in. Should analytics engineers or analysts write metrics in the semantic layer? What do we think?
The question was, should analytics engineers or analysts?
Yes.
Both.
Both.
Both, yeah.
Both.
All right.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a good one. All right. One more. What's the best dashboard you've ever seen?
The best dashboard I've ever seen was probably one of the most boring dashboards I've ever seen. It was literally a couple tables and a graph, but what it did is it informed an entire business on a daily cadence, right? It had our critical elements. It had the day, what happened that day or the day before, what was the weekly trend, what was the monthly plus the month over month, and then what was it to goal. And then you got to see that on a bunch of different time horizons, which helped us really like execute on the business level. Like, okay, is there a shift in a trend here? What happened there? Are we going to pacing to meet goal? So like, but it was tables, right? It just came down to tables, and it was boring, but it was so effective.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, boring can be good sometimes. All right, 30. Roxy, do you want to take this in 30 seconds?
I was thinking, I don't know if I have a good answer to this one. Like I haven't, and maybe this is sad, but in my career, like I haven't ever been like, oh, this is the best dashboard ever, which I will say, this is my shameless plug. I will say the dashboards that we have internally powered by the semantic layer are very cool and great to interact with. But also I was at Tableau conference last month, and they have this, I'm forgetting the name, but it's basically a competition where basically all of, some experts in Tableau are creating like the most interesting visualizations. So I saw a number of really cool things I didn't even know were possible. So that was pretty cool. There's a name for it that I'm forgetting.
Thank you so much. So I have a few seconds left. Thank you both so much. Thanks for taking the time. Folks, the recording will be available later. Check out the DBT Community Merge channel. We'll post it there. We'll also email it by tomorrow. And please keep your eyes out for next month's AMA with Tristan, July 30th at 3 p.m.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Samara.